candidate is filtered to identify all candidates who are interested in the type of work that the department is looking to fill. During this fiscal year, on average, it has taken departments approximately 84 days from the date that candidates are referred to the effective hire date, with the shortest amount of time being 34 days and the longest amount of time being 151 days.
And what do you think? What's a typical timeline for a candidate once they've been selected for referral? What are the next steps that take place that can take up to 150 days?
Once the candidate has been selected for referral to city departments, generally departments will conduct an interview with the candidates. After the interviews are completed, candidates are notified if they are selected or not. Those who are selected are then scheduled for fingerprinting and background appointments. At that point, departments wait for their results, analyze their results. If the candidate clears fingerprinting and backgrounds, then they are assigned an effective hire date and may begin working.
So how old are some of the initial applications? I mean, targeted local hire has now been around for a few years. Do we have people that sit on that list because of the random selection and no one communicates with them, and 3 or 4 years later we outreach to them? How does this play out? And are there ways to keep the list fresh so we know that they're still interested, or are we making a lot of calls to people that have been employed, have moved away, have died? I mean, what's the pool like?
Yes, thank you for that question. Personnel department staff communicates with candidates in the TLH program candidate pool. Their applications are initially active for 1 year from the date that they apply. If within that year they have not been hired through the city, then we follow up with them to determine if they are still interested in being part of the TLH program, to find out if they're still interested in being in the pool or if they've moved on and accepted job offers elsewhere. At that time, candidates have 2 opportunities to let us know if they are still interested, and they do so by clicking a button on an email that they receive. They receive an email 30 days before their application expires and a follow-up email 5 days before their application expires. If the candidate does not wish to continue in the program, or they are non-responsive and do not verify that they wish to continue in the program, then their applications expire and they are removed from the candidate pool. This process happens annually for each candidate based on their individual application dates.
And are there other factors that add to the low response rate that we haven't discussed, or are those the primary factors?
Those are the primary factors, but there could be a number of other factors that may be contributing to a low response rate. For example, there are other employment programs that are available and outreaching to the same underserved populations that the targeted local hire program outreaches to. For example, the County of Los Angeles has a very similar program. So it's possible that some of these candidates are fortunately accepting employment opportunities elsewhere and simply moving on. This issue is also something that the Targeted Local Hire Working Group has briefly discussed and are looking further into. In fact, a subcommittee will be meeting to review this issue more closely. In the meantime, staff will continue to monitor those response rates and try to mitigate low response rates by, again, working closely with our partners, the Workser Centers and the community-based organizations that provide case management services to the candidates. We'll continue to follow up with candidates in the pool to renew their applications and ensure that they are still interested in the program. We'll continue to use text messages to notify candidates that they have been selected for referral. And we'll also empower candidates to select the city departments that they're most interested in working for, which may be all city departments or a select few for some candidates.
And I know we had a backlog of hiring requests. Has that been cleared as of now, or is there's still a backlog?
Thank you for that question. I do have my colleague, Ms. Shannon Cherry, on the line, who may be able to provide more information on the background and fingerprinting process.
Good afternoon, Council Member. My name is Shannon Cherry, and I oversee the Personnel Department Civilian Background Unit. According to state law and Mayor's Executive Directive number 15, applicants for employment, excluding public safety applicants, are not asked to disclose information concerning their conviction history until after a conditional job offer has been extended. So following a conditional job offer, the department HR representatives are instructed to schedule a live scan appointment and include the date of the appointment on the additional information form that candidates must complete. HR representatives understand that they are to schedule live scan appointments using our online scheduling system. We provide fingerprint appointment slots up to 3 months in advance. However, departments are highly encouraged to schedule appointments at their earliest convenience as time slots quickly fill up. For example, Public Works Bureau of Sanitation will block appointment slots in anticipation of hiring 30 refuse collection truck operators. Overall, we have a maximum of 18 appointment slots per day between the hours of 8 a.m. and 3:40 p.m., Tuesday through Thursday. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a maximum of 36 appointment slots per day, 2 times more than we have now. We will work with the department HR representatives to accommodate if in a time crunch, and we will also work to accommodate appointments that require rescheduling. Once an appointment has been scheduled and confirmed, candidates arriving at our facility will have their fingerprints taken. Fingerprint images must be transmitted to the Department of Justice, DOJ, within 24 hours. The average turnaround time between receiving results from the DOJ and notifying departments is 48 to 72 hours. This is, however, if there is no criminal history to report. The DOJ has up to 30 days to complete background checks, which can be delayed due to poor fingerprint quality or the existence of any criminal information in the applicant's record. So it could take.
So how's the situation with the backlog? Are we still backlogged on doing the background checks and fingerprinting and hiring requests in general?
There currently is no backlog, sir. As far as getting our, the live scan appointments and results to departments, we do not have a backlog at this time. However, we process approximately 200 live scans and 500 DOJ results on a monthly basis, and we're closely monitoring the numbers to support increased citywide hiring needs.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you both. I'm going to ask that we note and file the Personnel Department report and ask personnel to report back in 69 to 90 days with a status report on whether we're able to speed up the hiring process. So hopefully we won't hear that it still can take up to 150 days. Let's look at the steps we can take to streamline the process. And I thank you for your good work and for your report. Let's do item number 5 next.
Item 5, CAO report relative to amending the Los Angeles Administrative Code to establish disability retirement benefits for the public safety officers who are members of Los Angeles City Employees Retirement System Tiers 1 and 3.
And if we could get a summary of the report and recommendations.
Yeah, good afternoon, Council Member Paul Weber. I work for the CAO's office, Employee Relations Division. The city employs approximately 80 peace officers in the Los Angeles Police Department, Port, Airport, and Department of Recreation and Parks who are LACER members enrolled in Tiers 1 and 3. As such, these peace officers are entitled to the same level of disability benefit as civilian employees instead of the level of benefit provided to their sworn city counterparts who are employed in the same departments and classifications. The proposal before the committee is to provide level of disability benefits to the 80 peace officers who are LACER members equal to the level of benefit provided in the Los Angeles Fire, Police, and Plan Tier 6.
And what's the cost difference? How much will equalizing this, which I think is clearly a question of fairness, how much more will it wind up costing the city?
Well, the proposed enhancement to the disability benefits for the LACER peace officers will be equal to the cost to the benefits provided to the Los Angeles Fire, Police, Pension peace officers. So they'll be very comparable.
Do you know what the dollar amount is by any chance to make
Yes,
this
sir.
change? I know it was less than we originally thought.
Yes, sir. So the combined cost between the general fund and the departments, proprietary departments, the initial cost is $430,000, and then 15 years we have amortized costs at $70,000 a year. And keep in mind, as these individuals, as the background information provides, they're tenured employees. Last year, average age of 48 and over 20 years of service. So we can anticipate that as they retire on regular service pensions, that the cost will continue to lower.
Okay. And the report's recommendations need to be approved by EERC as well?
Yes, sir. We're going to have to secure bargaining instructions from EERC, negotiate the benefit with the affected labor unions, and prepare implementing ordinances for the city council to consider. And then there is a possibility that we'll have to get a final actuarial study to refresh the original study that is in the record.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. And I'm going to recommend on item number 5 that we approve the CAO's recommendations. So
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let's go to item number 4.
Item 4, CAO report relative to proposed amendment number 1 to contract number C-135368 with Workday, Inc. to implement a phased-in approach to the HRP system go-live and to increase the total contract not to exceed amount from $62,109,970 to $76,773,479.
Okay, well, I'd like to ask the CAO to provide an overview of your report on item number 4.
Hi, good afternoon. Maria Ramos with the Office of the City Administrative Officer, and I will be giving a brief overview on the report. As you know, the Information Technology Agency, along with personnel, the controller, and the City Administrative Officer, have been working to replace the city's existing 20-year-old PACER payroll system with the new Human Resources and Payroll Solution, the HRP project. The vendor, Workday, Inc., began project implementation in April of 2020, with full system implementation projected to end in December of 2021. However, in September of 2021, ITA submitted a report to the Information Technology Oversight Committee on the status of the HRP project, recommending the need to shift to a phased deployment that would delay the project by 1 year. The phased approach would result in the city implementing modules at 2 different points in 2022. This would be in April and December. The report that ITA submitted was approved by the Oversight Committee and transmitted to this committee, PA Committee, the Information Technology and General Services Committee, and the Budget and Finance Committee. Council subsequently adopted all 3 council committees' reports that concurred with the phased approach. So this proposed amendment codifies what council has already approved with regard to the phased implementation of the HRP system. The phased approach would result in an increase to the total contract compensation limit from $62.1 million to $76.8 million to accommodate the project cost increase. And this increase does include a contingency of approximately 15% of the total professional services fees through the life of the contract. The term of the contract will remain the same. It does not change. It's at 10 years through June 30th, 2029. The estimated general fund impact of the proposed phase implementation is an additional $14.3 million. This impact does include increased costs for the workday contract, PACER contractors, which are needed to continue maintenance on PACER throughout 2022. It does include testing tools, and it does include costs for the consultant services for quality assurance. Our office does recommend that the full anticipated cost increase of $14.3 million that is associated with the phase implementation be appropriated from the reserve fund. Of the $14.3 million, approximately $943,000 will need to be appropriated to the Office of the CAO for the quality assurance consultant, as this contract is administered by the CAO. The balance of $13.3 million would be appropriated to ITA's contractual services account for other HRP costs. And I do have staff from ITA here, as well as other CAO staff members who are available to answer any questions that you may have.
Councilmember, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I have loud gardeners from my next door neighbor passing by, so I put it on mute whenever I need to. First, how will the quality assurance assessment that it's in the city's best interest to move the go-live date for the HCM module of the project from April 10th to May 8th affect the cost of the project and the workday contract?
We believe that the May 8th date can be achieved within the current proposed contract amount.
Well, that's good to hear. And ITA proposes that if the HCM module of HRP can't go live by May 8th, that the city will have to pay Workday $1 million a month. Do you agree with that cost assessment, and what's that based upon?
So I'll take that one, Ben Sahel with the CAO. So I don't think the $1 million per month is a cost that would be entirely due to Workday. I think the amount is more order of magnitude of the overall cost to the city for additional delay, and that cost could be borne either by Workday, although we would negotiate against any increased costs from the contractors. It could also be borne by the PACER team that is continuing to work on that existing system, and or also could be borne by other aspects of reasons for why we're delaying, which could include change orders driven by city staff that feel that we need certain scope changes to make the system work the way we would like it to work, or enhancements to the systems beyond what's in the current scope. So again, it was more, I think, an order of magnitude to kind of remind us that delays do come with some cost, and not necessarily completely coming from the Workday contract.
Okay, well, those are all my questions on this item, so I'm going to recommend that we approve the CAO's recommendations on item 4. Then item number 3. First, I want to thank Gartner for producing what I feel is a very objective assessment of the HRP project to date. And it's great to have a realistic progress report to discuss. I feel the funds the city is spending on our contract with them to be our quality assurance so far is money very well spent. And I'd like Gartner to present their report to the committee, taking into account the 7 recommendations they provide in their HRP Phase 1 Go Live Readiness Summary.
Okay, let me just read this one for the record here. This would be a CAO report relative to the Phase 1 Go Live Readiness Assessment Project from the Human Resources and Payroll Quality Assurance Consultant, Gartner, Inc., in connection with the HRP project.
I think you are on mute, Ms. Wilson, but welcome.
I am. Thank you. Thank you, Council Member. Appreciate that. I am Christine Wilson, a Senior Director with Gartner Consulting. I'm the Engagement Manager for the Gartner team, and I'm joined today by several of my Gartner colleagues. Just a quick summary. Gartner has been asked to provide quality assurance for the HRP project. During the month of February, our focus was specifically on the project's readiness to go live with phase 1 on April 10th. That was the target date. We produced a go live readiness assessment report and published that on March 3rd. And that report provides recommendations for the project going forward. The readiness assessment was shared with this committee on March 8th. And since then, of course, time has passed and the project has continued to march forward. So we just asked the committee to understand that the document that we have in front of us today was accurate as of its publishing date on March 3rd. So if you refer to the report, page 11 and 12 really provides the summary of the results of the report. On page 11, it provides an overall dashboard view of the project's readiness to go live for phase 1 on April 10th. And at that time, the time of publishing, we assessed the project to be at entering the significant risk level of relative to April 10th go live. That significant risk level is a level 4 out of a possible 5, with 5 being the highest level of risk. We did have 4 specific areas of highest risk related to go live, and those were functional requirements for the project, scope, schedule, and interfaces and integrations. If you refer to page 12 of our report, this provides a summary of our recommendations. And they're identified there around each of the risk categories, summarizing those 7 recommendations into really a kind of a crisp summary, executive summary version, really boils down to 3 things. At that time, and still today, the project will benefit from the identifying a clear set of functionality that is operationally critical at the time of phase 1 go live, and identifying those things that can be deferred. And when I say functionality, I just mean the things that the system will do, functions that the system can do and support from an operational perspective. So to decide on that set of functionality that's needed at phase 1 go live, the steering committee should agree upon a set of criteria to use in making that decision, deciding what elements need to be in place at go live and what can be deferred. And that criteria should take into consideration the costs and risks associated with delaying past April 10th in order to achieve any functionality that currently is not live in the system. And then the third element is ensuring that integrations between Workday and Pacer are built and tested and operating accurately and consistently. And by integrations, that just means that's the vehicle by which data moves back and forth between Workday and Pacer. So that really is a summary of our recommendations. Those were related to April 10th go live. Those still stand in relation to any future go live date. Those are the things that we believe must be done and in place in order for the project to go live for phase 1.
So I know a lot has happened since the reports were written. Do you believe the risk ratings that you assigned to the various categories have changed substantively since your report was submitted in any or all of the categories?
The project has made a lot of progress since the report was written. So we I'm not sure that the risk rating would change exactly, only because these still are the high priority areas of the project to focus on relative to any new go live date. So I don't know that the risk level would change. However, the project has made progress. We've seen the work that the team has done to agree upon a set of functionality for phase one. As of today, there is a full list of functionality defined, and that includes the department's identified must-haves from an operational perspective. And that's good. We did not see that at the time of publishing our report, and that is in place today.
So you feel that that's complete, which was possibly the greatest concern, that there wasn't even an agreement on where we were trying to get to. So how do you follow a map when you don't know where you're going? So
Yes.
So you think that we now do know where we're working to head?
We believe the list is complete. The departments have been asked to check the list one more time to be sure that it includes everything. So our reading of the list is that it is complete, including not only things that are in progress, being tested and need to be fixed, but also elements that don't yet have a solution that is sufficient from an operational perspective for the city. And so if those, in our opinion, those things are on the list, and we're looking forward to the departments confirming that they feel everything is represented on the list as well.
And are we close to agreeing on a criteria of what needs to be ready and what can be put off until phase two? And what the costs and risks are of going forward with things that we may not be quite ready for, as opposed to the risks in doing so?
There has been progress in that area, in both of those areas as well. First, on the criteria, criteria has been presented to the steering committee about how to make decisions about the must-haves, so what functions need to be in place at go live and what can be deferred. Those aren't necessarily new criteria; they've been around for a while. But from a QA perspective, what we're looking for is agreement on those criteria. We want to know that all the parties that are subject to the application of those criteria in a decision-making process, and we'll use those in a decision-making process, agree to them. So those have been presented, and we would like to know that the departments are in agreement with the criteria.
But we aren't there yet. We don't have the agreement. We've had them presented by each player, but not agreed to by the whole group yet.
Well, they've been presented at least a couple of times, and there have not been objections. So that's so that if without objection, then they're agreed to, then they would be agreed to. There have not been objections.
Yes. Well, I don't.
Yes.
I think we probably need to nail that down, but that's
Yes.
at least a good sign that we're moving in the right direction. And
We would agree.
how about the Pacer HRP integration? Is that fully tested and workable, or do we believe we're at least on track for that to be correct by presumably May 8th go live?
So the integrations, we know that there is active testing going on. The integrations, the way they're tested is not just once and it passes and it's done. It's an iterative process. They're tested over many days, multiple times a day. So we know that the testing is underway. We don't have really good visibility at this time into how close they are to being completed. They is a kind of a general word. We know there are 17 integrations that are critical for phase one go live. The majority of those are related to Pacer. The biggest one integration 5000. That's the main integration between Workday and Pacer. We know that's still in testing, running twice a day, 7 days a week. So that's really what we know from a QA perspective at this point, as far as kind of judging the level of completion of those. We would need more information on that as it emerges from the testing.
And I wonder if you could explain the importance of a well-defined and documented change control process and how our lack of one has impacted the project so far.
You know, I might ask one of my colleagues from the Gartner team possibly to weigh in on this question on the change control process. Maybe PJ, Joshi, would you be able to support on this question, please?
Yeah, happy to chime in here. I think with a change control process, you need to have clear options laid out in terms of benefits, but also impacts to the schedule. We do know that there is a change control board and that there is intention to go through the remaining outstanding items through that change control process to determine what additional gaps need to be addressed through configuration or other such work, and what might be items that can be tabled until a future phase.
So we do have a process in place now, or just going into place? Where do we stand on it?
We understand that there is an ongoing change control board and that there is intention to talk through the remaining outstanding items, and we look forward to participating in that dialogue.
Great. And have you all discussed your findings and recommendations with Bob Hess since your report was written? And if so, what are his opinions about the proposed course corrections?
We have not discussed our findings with Bob Hess. We would be happy to do so. We welcome his thoughts and insight and his experience, based on his experience. We have talked with him during the interviewing portion, while we were gathering data in order to write the report. So we did speak with him then, but we have not yet reviewed our recommendations with him, but are happy to do that.
Yeah, I would ask you to do that, and perhaps your monthly reports can include a section where we get direct and documented input from Bob Hess on the Pacer Workday integration readiness. Also, one of the 7 recommendations is that the HRP team define the specific costs and risks of a delayed go live so that the HRP steering committee can make fully informed decisions, weighing the cost of the system not performing some of the functions that are thought to be critical versus the cost of delaying implementation long enough to make those things work. So, and also, you note that a contingency plan and a realistic cost and risk assessment and analysis should be approved by the steering committee prior to March 12th to prepare for a revised go-live date. Has the steering committee approved the contingency plan? And what does that mean for a go-live date?
The project team has presented a contingency plan to the steering committee. It's really a portion of a contingency plan, which is an options analysis. For this purpose, the options analysis does what's needed here, and that is lay out various options for go-live dates and the associated pros and cons, and the pros and cons associated with them. So that options have been presented to the steering committee twice now. The options, of course, have been modified, given feedback from the committee, and also just as time progresses, things change. So as of today, the steering committee has present in front of them options to consider, and they'll meet again on Friday to provide their approval on one of the options. And we do believe that the team has laid out pros and cons associated with those options. And there are some cost information that has been provided along with that. So definitely the options have been laid out with pros and cons. And if the committee needs additional information, we would, certainly support the committee in requesting that level of detail that they need to make those good decisions.
So in theory, a contingency plan could be ready as early as this Friday?
Yes, a selection of one of the options the committee will be asked to select one of the date options, one of the go live date options during their meeting on Friday. That's my understanding of the next steps for the steering committee.
Great. And ITA's status report in response to your assessment asserts that it addresses the recommendations in your report. Do you believe it resolves the issues you've raised in your recommendations, that the city's mitigated all the risks that you identified? And if not, is it realistic that your 7 key recommendations would be completed by the end of next week?
So the project team, ITA and Workday and the project team responded quickly and very thoroughly to the recommendations. There's identified corrective actions associated with all of the critical and significant risk recommendations. And we've, of course, reviewed those recommendations carefully, and we think that the team has addressed them, addressed them with plans that are complete and in good faith to address what we've stated in our report. Now what's coming is the execution of those things, right? And as you mentioned, there's a time frame associated with those. Not every one of those is critical to do in the next week and a half. They don't have to achieve every one of those recommendations. The ones that are that I've described today really are the ones that need to be addressed in order to make that decision to go to the gold tenant build.
And
by
do you,
gold,
do you think we have the possibility to get there by the end of next week?
It looks to us like that May 8th date is a possible date. It does look to us that's possible, with the decision to move to the gold build being, at the end of next week. We think that the team can make it, given where they are. Again, the kind of unknown area would be the integrations. If the critical integrations that must be in place before beginning the gold build, if those can be done by that time, then we think the team has a good chance of making it.
And as of today, have the sponsoring departments been working towards agreement on the functionality that has to be in place for phase 1? What's your confidence level that all of that will be agreed to by their next steering committee meeting?
The department's personnel and controller have been participating in the process to identify that full set of functionality. We know that personnel department has developed a full list of things that are not only things that need to be retested and fixed, but also things that are missing in terms of, the system currently doesn't do something in the way that the department needs it to be done. So we know that personnel and controller and CAO have been part of those discussions and contributing to that list.
And you note in your overview that one key goal is to document lessons learned from phase 1 of the project for the city's consideration to address phase 2. At this point, after 60 days of analysis and interviews, what are the key lessons learned from our 2 years of work so far?
That's a great question. I think we haven't considered this question quite yet. We're kind of in the thick of it for phase one, but
Christine, I'm happy to chime in. I think it's so important for all
Sure.
stakeholders to be aligned and on
Yes.
the same page. We've come in at a time where we see a dashboard tracker to track all the outstanding items. We like to think that through some of our recommendations, there's even more detail and granularity on aligning all stakeholders on what is in scope, what is the complete list of things that need to be completed. I think getting to that early for phase two, if that doesn't already exist, once we dig into phase two, is going to be so important for the continued success of the program.
Mhm. And I would add to that, PJ, continuing to shine a bright light on areas that may be murky, where there may be misunderstanding, there may be differences of viewpoints that aren't discussed or exposed. We wouldn't want those to linger, because that just eats up time. And then at the end of the time, you realize, oh, we didn't have the same understanding, then that time is lost. So getting clarity on understanding and the path forward together, so the team can work in partnership, across all the departments, marching toward the same goal, and have clarity that everyone is marching toward the same goal.
Well, thank you. Thank you for our QA report, and I will ask that we note and file the report from Gartner, and thank you for your good work thus far.
Thank you, Councilmember. We appreciate the opportunity to present today.
Thank you. And now item number 2.
Item 2, Information Technology Agency report relative to the status of the Human Resources and Payroll project. This matter has also been referred to the Information Technology and General Services and Budget and Finance committees.
Again, thank you to Gartner for indulging me with all these questions. And now I'd like to ask ITA to present their report for item number 2.
Ted Ross, General Manager with ITA. I'd like to ask Steve O'Donnell and Marty Hodgett from Accenture to provide an overview on the report.
Thank you. Councilmember Kretz, Steve O'Donnell with Workday, reading out on behalf of the Hrp program. As has been reported with the previous readouts, the Hrp program had a meeting on March 4th where we were unable to meet the agreement to target April 10th. As read out earlier with Christine from Gartner, it was mainly due to issues around consensus of functionality, some of the consensus around outstanding items. We had then committed from that meeting to really coalesce around the functionality, getting a holistic view of exactly what was outstanding and consensus around that. And we presented some contingencies around some subsequent go lives, specifically around May 8th. We presented those options and contingencies around that, namely some of the topics that have been spoken about previously in this meeting around the cost associated with subsequent go lives beyond May 8th. Since then, the team has been working very hard, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody within the city that is focused on Hrp for the progress that has been made to date. It has been a tremendous amount of work. Also, subsequently, we did receive the Gartner report, which we had a readout on March 9th, which was very constructive, very helpful with the recommendations, and we can confidently say helped us present meaningful findings on elements that we were then able to read back out to the steering committee as early as this morning, and the subject matter experts to make sure that they understood the whole list, the holistic list. We had upwards of over 4,000 items that we coalesced. All of the recommendations that were provided by Gartner were thankfully existed, and we just needed to clarify them and place them into one readout. We have since done that, and Also, that has been reported, the subject matter experts within personnel, controller's office, CAO are now finally going through a final review of that, what we're calling the universe, the functionality list, to make sure that they are in alignment. And we are scheduled to meet this Friday to get a progress check and make sure that we are aligned not only on the comprehensiveness of the list, but also to make sure that there is agreement around the steps that are needed to go forward to meet our milestone. We also have a subsequent meeting scheduled on the 23rd, which is Wednesday of next week, as a backup to make sure that we have the proper room to be able to make that decision to commit to a May 8th go live.
And what's your general overall impression of the assessment of the HRP project to date that Gartner provided in their report?
Ed Ross with ITA. I believe Gartner, in fact, the ITA staff believe Gartner did a good job of quickly getting up to speed, analyzing the various angles of the project. So it's not just, the world according to one stakeholder, but talking with various stakeholders and identifying key risk areas for the phase 1 go live. As was mentioned, within the day of their report with the findings, we came up with proposed next steps for the HRP project to resolve those items. We take their recommendations very seriously. We met with the steering committee members the following day, had group discussions around the next steps, and have been working hard on the execution of those items, some of which Christine Wilson from Gartner was describing. But as Christine said, it's about the execution of those tasks. So simply putting words on paper doesn't change anything, but actually implementing actions can make those changes. So every member of the steering committee has their work cut out for them on this critical city project, but we believe that we're much better aligned to accomplishing it, getting it done.
That's great. Now, I know Gartner recommends that some of the large departments should have a voice at the HRP steering committee level. Are they now being invited to and attending steering committee member meetings or not?
Yes and no. We have not invited the 5 departments mentioned by QA to join the steering committee, but we believe we had a better alternative that QA agreed could work to solve what they were describing. And I'll briefly describe how we got to this approach. When we heard this recommendation, they listed 5 specific departments that they thought should be added to the steering committee, and we had a follow-up meeting with QA to better understand their suggestion. And as we understood it and we typed it out and QA agreed with the assessment, it sounded like they thought that by giving those departments a seat at the steering committee table, they would have a better opportunity to A, understand the project, B, buy into it, and C, communicate any concerns. While we completely understand the intent of it, if you were to look at what we discuss at the steering committee and the nature of the steering committee meetings, we would probably expect that by inviting them into our steering committee, they likely would be very frustrated with sitting in on topics that don't relate to them and would likely not better understand the project, buy into it, or have the opportunity to communicate their concerns. So we came up with an alternative approach. Instead, we're setting up an Hrp readiness meeting for what we call Tier 1 departments. And it focuses exclusively on the items that QA mentioned, as opposed to some of the other topics that show up in the steering committee. The first half would provide education, timely education. It talks about what HRP will provide their department, the countdown to the go live, what they need to do, the checklist of what they do to be ready. And the second half of those meetings would include a discussion about open concerns, additional requests. We believe that by doing this as a group, it'll also allow them to compare notes. So it allowed those 5 departments plus 9 others. So we're actually signing up to run this for 14 different departments. And it would allow them to be able to discuss concern solutions and kind of agree and resolve them, kind of in a like a cohort or a community. These are large departments who are all impacted in some of the same ways, some different ways by the HRP project, and we are in the process with Accenture of bringing that meeting together now.
It sounds like that would meet the goal of it without having some of the departments having their heads spin with issues that might not be relevant to them and might be just too in the weeds and technical. So
yeah,
it sounds like a reasonable approach to reaching the intention of the recommendation. So I commend you for that. I wonder if you could give us feedback on your point of view on the Gartner comment as far as the possibility of inadequate staffing. So I know that's been a concern of mine from the beginning of this process. How do we think we're doing at this point in terms of making sure we have enough staff and put the focus in that we absolutely need to do this right?
Right. I think projects like this, large projects like this, often follow the adage of, plan for the best, prepare for the worst, or expect the best, prepare for the worst. And we absolutely commend the support of City Council and the Mayor's office for previous staffing requests, for the Controller's office, for personnel, et cetera. Gartner listed 2 items specifically in their report. First is that each sponsor department should identify their HRP team members and create staff capacity. And they mentioned things like temporary reassignment of non-HRP responsibilities to other staff. They discussed temporarily borrowing staff from other departments to assist with the HRP effort. Towards those recommendations, the ITA, working with personnel specifically, identified a list of potential temporary staff and retirees from other departments, and we're working with the Mayor's office to try to make this happen. A second item listed by Gartner is the request is for the city to assess for the post-go-live support beyond the 60-day hypercare support provided by the vendors. In previous projects, we found that support issues, whether it's FMS procurement, some of these other large projects, we found that support issues are often reduced by over 75% after the first 30 days. So we find the first 30 days to be critical. The next 30 days, we found a further reduction. But of course, still on an ongoing sense, you still have questions from time to time. Some of them basic, some of them more complex. So Accenture presented a post-go-live support model, presented it to personnel, is going to be presenting it to the steering committee also, and are expanding that level of effort. So in short, we believe that using proven post-go-live support models, where there's level 1, level 2, level 3 of support, help desk who handles the first, escalates it, et cetera. We also think the additional self-service support could try to reduce the workload. And in comparing with other systems, we feel that maybe existing levels of resources should be able to provide it, but we're always going to work closely with controller and personnel to identify if maybe that's missing the mark. I'm sorry, council member, on mute. Probably the blowers again.
Yeah, they were by a couple minutes ago. So how do we think we're doing in terms of getting the support that you said from the mayor's office and others to actually get to where we need in terms of temporary supplemental staff?
Yeah, I think, personnel department and controller are probably the best to answer that question, simply because they're the ones who are, the most directly impacted. They know the pain points of their staff. They know, the workload that staff have been incorporating, et cetera. So I'd be open for personnel to weigh in on it because I know they've been working with mayor's office also.
That would be great.
Good afternoon, Dana Brown, General Manager of the Personnel Department. Well, from a Personnel Department perspective, we've certainly been overwhelmed, obviously, by the resources necessary to complete the project, the testing, and so forth, and obviously the continuation to support the project post-go-live. But thankfully, we have been afforded additional resources, and we're in the process of filling those positions even as we speak. So, the downside is that, in many cases, we are taken from our other areas of personnel services because, those are going to be the staff members and the classifications that are necessary. But we have been afforded additional resources, and we're very thankful for that, at least from a personnel place. Perhaps the controller.
I know also it was mentioned that we might be able to pull some people temporarily in the next month or two from other departments. Are you getting any help in the effort to do that?
So my understanding is that we had been trying to get some people from the Department of Water and Power, and I don't think that we've been successful where that's concerned, but I'm going to need to talk to my staff about that. I think that DWP has not been a resource that we had hoped they would be. And so that I think that's part and parcel to why we did get additional resources to be able to hire more staff. And so that's what we're doing. We're at a place in this project where, my staff is completely engaged in trying to meet the deadlines that the steering committee have discussed. And so it takes lots of resources, lots of concentration, lots of testing, and that's where they have been putting all of their resources.
And I'd say don't give up on other departments. Don't let them off the hook too easy, because this is too important to the city, and everybody's got to be a team player, even for just a few weeks.
Agreed.
Let's see. So back to ITA, what will you do to assure subject matter experts' recommendations from Personnel Department and Controller's Office are promptly implemented by the project management team?
Certainly. When I think of the steering committee, I think of a group of equals, and everyone plays a critical role on the project. ITA, for example, technically responsible, need to make sure the software works, high performance, security issues, interfaces, etc. We all know controllers responsible around payroll processing, personnel, around hiring, personnel actions, etc. And I honestly, and the teams know that, I certainly think the world of the subject matter experts and the recommendations they provide. I could never propose to consider myself a payroll expert or to consider myself an HR expert, et cetera. And I think this is an area where we've really made a lot of progress specifically. As General Manager Brown from Personnel stated, they are very engaged. In fact, quite often when we were discussing the phase one functionality, it wasn't so much that we didn't have an initial list of requirements for phase one, it's that as our subject matter experts get into the system, as they test, as they configure, as they work with various aspects, they come up with new recommendations for how a system can work better, or for key requirements, or maybe they understood it one way, but they now see it another. And this is all very, very good for the quality of a project. And so the incorporating of it comes through our master functionality list, the phase one functionality list. And the subject matter experts, as stated by QA and others, have been an integral part of that process.
And do you think integrations between Workday and Pacer, including rigorous, consistent testing, are now complete to the point where Gartner described as necessary for go live? And is it necessary for phase one payroll to be accurate? And are we going to get there in time?
Without a doubt, it is necessary for phase one payroll to be accurate. And that's coming from someone who is a stakeholder in that payroll process, just me by myself. It is not fully and redundantly tested at this time, but it's certainly on track to be complete, as was previously described through QA. The integrations are reliably sending data between the two systems. So data is going back and forth, as was mentioned, running twice a day, 7 days a week, et cetera. But we're still in the process of confirming the full accuracy of every interface for every variation. And guaranteed, we are not going to even think about giving a go live decision for a system that has inaccuracies in its payroll.
And at least it sounds promising that go live May 8th is possible. And if not, perhaps likely. Worst case scenario that we had to pick a date that follows, presumably 1 pay period, 2 pay periods after our goal date. I think the estimate that you've given is an additional $1 million a month funding and possible contract amendments. Where do we come up with this cost? What's that based on?
Certainly. Through the Hrp Contingency Plan effort that was referenced by QA, the team's been working to come up with assessment of what are pros and cons of alternative go-live dates. And I think without speaking on behalf of controller, personnel, or CAO, I think, you quite often you kind of have these scales. If you give more time, you can build more things into a system, but you also run into other risks associated with it. So that comparison was both monetary and non-monetary impacts. So an additional cost, for example, mentioned was because previous project delay costs were to the order of about $1 million a month based on the Pacer team, Workday, and other delay costs. There's also, of course, non-monetary costs, such as potential impacts to the second phase of the project, right? The further we delay phase one, the more we impact phase two. We also can have impacts to department readiness and training. I'm reminded frequently by Robin Murphy and Accenture, who meets with departments on a monthly basis, if not more often, that quite often departments are raring to go and ready to get into the system. We don't want to risk them losing their momentum or losing their energy to go ahead and try the new system out. We also know, as was mentioned by Krista Binder from the Controller's Office this morning, the further we try to delay phase one, we start running into the Controller's fiscal year end. And so if given the choice, the Controller's Office made the statement, we'd rather go live earlier than later, because as we get closer into the fiscal year end, in let's say a June timeframe, then we have controller staff who are working on fiscal year end and wouldn't be as available to work on these other topics. So
Yeah, so obviously it makes sense for us to go as soon as we're ready, obviously not before we're ready. And hopefully not after we're ready. We want to do what we can to at least maximize the things that we really need to be able to do and do them right. And I don't know if we wind up having to identify one or two that we're not ready for, but they're not 100% essential at this moment, and we can just delay them until phase two.
I would say, as an IT professional, that in the last 60 seconds, you just defined what is happening with the HRP project. I think you did a fantastic job of stating that. We don't want to go as soon as we're ready, but no sooner, right?
Exactly. All right, and I have a couple of questions for personnel. Of course, I know your staff is feverishly working with Workday to determine what functionalities are critical of to the success of phase one going live. Where are you in this process?
Yes, you're correct. My staff received the critical functionality list last night around 7:30 p.m. So they've not had an opportunity to complete the review, but they are reviewing as we speak, and they are targeted to be ready to reconvene with the steering committee on Friday to confirm the final list. And I think a couple people brought up the upcoming meeting on Friday with the steering committee before. So we are targeting that time period to be ready to confirm the final list.
So everything is pretty much on target for your team in terms of being ready by Friday.
Yes, in terms of the review of the critical functionalities, yes.
Right. And do you think the HRP steering committee has agreed upon criteria for your department to use in making these decisions about critical functions? Are we there yet?
Well, so to the degree that the HRP steering committee is not like a Robert's rules per se type of a committee, so agreed upon is kind of a more broad term, but certainly it is generally understood that the list that we received last night should be reviewed and could be and hopefully will be the final agreed upon criteria.
Great. And what's your response to Gartner's steering committee leadership observations and recommendations in general?
Well, it appears that Gartner has performed a thorough assessment of the project, and the recommendations made related to the steering committee's leadership are appropriate and well received. The observations that they made with respect to the non-consolidated and proprietary departments are understandable, but because I understand the HR and payroll practices in those departments, I don't think we need to be overly concerned with anything other than the training of the front-end users in those departments. And we have begun the training of HR employees, and we're actually collecting feedback from those employees to ensure that their personal comfort is where it needs to be with what they've learned and their ability to perform their jobs post go live. So also in the area of sort of user readiness, the Gartner report determined that change management is in a good place, which is certainly encouraging. That's an area that we are continuing to pay attention to, because obviously user readiness is as important as system readiness.
And how do you feel about user readiness based on the testing you've done so far? You think you're on track to be ready timely?
Yeah, well, I'm very hopeful. I mean, as you know, I was telling a colleague earlier, when we went from Word Perfect to Word, I thought, what are we going to do? And I know that is a much, smaller level, but it was a big deal to those of us who were, relying on those systems. And so what we've done is we've recrafted or added a few extra questions to the post-training questionnaire to find out sort of whether or not people are comfortable, if they think they need refreshers. The timing of training matters. So obviously, the more we push out going live, then more training, might be necessary because employees have, the training becomes sort of cold after a while. So everybody has been very supportive in making whatever changes are necessary around the training. So we are hopeful that employees are going to be comfortable as they can be, and that we'll be ready for post-go live support.
And the complete irrelevancy, I always like word perfect better. I miss it.
Look, sir, thank you, sir. That's all right. I'm finally getting over it.
And what are your thoughts on Gartner's observations regarding inadequate staffing from your department's perspective?
Sure. So as I indicated earlier, we have been fortunate enough to receive additional resources, and we're filling those positions. And we look forward to, as you've indicated, continuing to work with other departments like DWP to try to get additional support for this very important endeavor.
Great. Well, keep trying. Couple of questions for the Controller's Office. Do you believe the HRP Steering Committee has agreed upon criteria for your department to use in making decisions about HRP's critical functionality?
Yes. Hi. Good afternoon. Krista Binder with the Controller's Office. Similar to what Dana Brown was saying, we received the list late last night, and our team is working through that list with the go live or not go live to present that and agree upon it by Friday at the steering committee.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on the Gartner observations relating to inadequate staffing?
I think their observation is very accurate. As the report states, time frames set may not take into consideration team members' other responsibilities, such as support to the PACER system. And although we have done a lot of work to prepare departments, this big organizational change of going to a system like Workday is very significant. I think post-go-live support is going to take substantial effort and will require staff from all sponsor departments. I know specifically to the Controller's Office, we have asked for 12 additional positions in the proposed budget. However, at this time, we're examining our needs and are considering asking for resources sooner to ensure we have adequate staffing for phase 2 activities.
And how do we get those and from where? I would think your department might be a more difficult one to staff up because you might need more technical expertise. I don't know if it's as easy to grab people from other departments and have them just fit into the right boxes.
You have said the exact thing that we've been talking about. It's very challenging to find people that can come in with that technical expertise and, and getting people that hopefully maybe have had some expertise with Workday. So we're having those conversations now.
Great. And what's your response to Gartner's steering committee leadership observations and recommendations? What are your thoughts?
I thought their observations were very accurate. I know from our perspective, it has been somewhat of a challenge to understand what we are striving for and how to measure success. I would welcome an exercise by the steering committee to kind of revisit the project charter and to refresh our roles and responsibilities as it relates to our project success. I think that would help the steering committee get more aligned. And I think for our office, when we go to phase 2, this is payroll, getting that piece of the project working correctly. So I would really like to see high engagement from our key stakeholders that have really large and complex payroll operations. I think their input can only strengthen our knowledge of citywide impacts to implementing this part of the HRP project.
Great, and hopefully that happens. Well, thank you, everybody, and I'd like to first ask that we approve the CAO's recommendations, which we will as a report from the chair. I'd like to ask the Personnel Department to report back at our April 6th PA committee meeting on the status of filling the new 10 HRP positions recently approved by council, and including status of temporarily borrowing staff from other assignments or departments during the key go-live period. I'd also like the HRP steering committee to report back at our May 18th PA committee meeting, assuming that we have already gone live on May 8th with a realistic phase 2 schedule signed off by all 4 lead departments, and with any commentary on how the go live has gone in the first 10 days of implementation. I know there's no guarantee it actually goes live on May 8th, but certainly that's what we're shooting for. So under that assumption, if we could ask for a report on the 18th on how all that is going, that would be great. And Mr. Clerk, anything else before us?
That clears the desk, Mr. Chair.
So with our agenda fulfilled, I would ask that we adjourn. Thank you, everybody.